Pleased to be here today and talk a little bit about water. And I've been in the water space for my entire career, which is going on too long now, about 38 years. I think what I said, the chaos is what reigns today because there are so many opportunities. There's a lot of them out there. And here we've got just a few of them. And we'll get into each of them just at a very high level. But from a federal, we don't even talk too much about the state programs at this point. But I know Matt's back here. We've got the House Bill 2302, which is also something we look at for clients because it's a grant program that is very new, but it's very, very good and beneficial. And Drew will actually get into kind of the nuts and bolts, the tips of how to be successful and then how to continue to be compliant once you're awarded a grant. And we'll talk about that at the end there. This is what got everybody's attention a number of years ago. The numbers are big. When we start looking at the lead service line, that's about a 50% principal forgiveness. So very appealing to our clients. The emerging contaminant, which is 100% principal forgiveness, but it's got to qualify, and it is somewhat competitive because anything that is a PFAS compound project is probably going to get prioritized over something. For example, manganese is another emerging contaminant. So this is the complicated part too. You want to make sure you make good decisions as to, do we qualify? Are we going to go down this road? We've got to make sure we meet the criteria and that we're headed down a solid path. So you want to be careful and understand the framework or the rules surrounding each of the potential avenues. Then when we start talking about the federal programs, FEMA, I think we've already talked about it a little bit today. The BRIC, we saw a couple that were awarded. I know there's some that haven't been awarded at the federal level, but it's an appealing program because it's got 75%, up to 75% cost share. Then we USDA, which I'm sure there's a pretty high level of familiarity with those potential grant programs in there, and Commerce with the EDA grants, which is another popular one. Wanted to spend just a little bit more time talking about Bureau because that's been one that has kind of a broad sweep. You can look at all the programs that are included, and so you can usually find one that fits your project. Now, does it time out right? Does it make economic sense? Because these are competitive programs, so you got to be sure when you commit that it is the right fit and you've got a reasonable chance of success. So down that line, the case study, and I think we've already talked about it just briefly, it was on the list, was Dodge City. That was through the Water Smart program, specifically the Title 16, and it was successful. But it is an involved process. It took time. But you can see from the funding stack, very beneficial project for the city of Dodge. So, and that there's up to a 25% cost share based on the overall estimated total project cost. They're eligible for up to over $14 million through BOR. And that allowed them to leverage the Bill Kansas funds to the tune of $20 million. And there you see that significant local investment in this project as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Drew and let him talk about the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, so this is a good case study in Dodge City. We spent a little bit of time talking about strategy around which programs to go after. That is important because if you go down the wrong path, it's going to take you a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, hiring consultants to do work. So getting the right program matched up is critical. We think we did a good job on this one, and I think it shows in the outcome. But the other key element of this one was this is a mature project. A lot of times we hear, and maybe other consultants in the room here, hey, we kind of think we want to do this project. Maybe we've done a little bit of thinking about it. This project was perfect, and the HDR team talked a lot about application writing tips. I'm going to talk maybe more about our process, because that might resonate with some folks in the room on, how to manage these projects, grant writing efforts. So this is a good case study. So our water folks had done a lot of the study and analysis about the actual project. They brought our grant writing team in from transportation to really kind of do a QA/QC, do a strategy up front, make sure that as they were writing the technical language that was compliant, that we were kind of back checking whether that was compliant with the notice of funding opportunity. That's kind of an extra set of eyes. We brought in our graphic design team. I think you saw, we made it a little polished cover and some branding throughout, which the HDR team mentioned as well. But then you want to make sure that you have, I like to have like a PM that's not necessarily involved in the technical writing, but it's keeping this project on schedule, making sure we're hitting milestones, making sure, we're working with the client on when we can schedule those submittals, which Vanessa Lamoreau and I have started to get down to about a 5-minute process. Kudos to you on that. So these are some of the other just approaches we take in grant writing, and we applied it to the Dodge City project. So one thing that we think is really important is getting your cost estimates locked in as tight as possible. Obviously, a lot of these are really kind of earlier in design, maybe a little further along in design, but we think that about 80% of your costs are really tied to about 20% of your line items. So if you can have a GC or a cost estimator, somebody that really is locking in those cost estimates early, because the Build Kansas Fund and FHWA, if you bet low on your cost estimates and you go over, they're not going to come back with more money at the end of the project. That will be on the municipality to cover, or the water utility. We talked about kind of how the application writing goes, but it's about telling your story. You have your BCA, and then talking a little bit about siting and land acquisition, NEPA considerations. One element that I think is important for the water piece that also relates to transportation is that if your client or your municipality has stormwater projects, specifically if there's a way to incorporate green infrastructure, a lot of the US DOT programs that the HDR team talked about want to see green infrastructure, stormwater resiliency projects incorporated into those surface transportation projects. So just another element where different sectors are overlapping. Similar to what the HDR team, this is a pretty straightforward process. Pre-positioning, planning ahead of the NOFO, understanding what the rules are, keeping the administration's priorities in mind. The priorities listed in the notice of funding opportunity, there's usually 4, 5, 6, 7. Repeating those words back to them, keeping those priorities in mind. Obviously, to the extent possible, engaging the local community to show that the community supports the project, not just elected officials, and also that the workforce is ready to actually implement the project. And then we talked a little bit about the BCA. So I think that might be it for our water presentation.